She walked into that diner with nothing but the hope of a quiet meal, but what she got was a table full of bullies, snide whispers, and laughter loud enough to shatter the little confidence she had left. They didn't even try to hide it, mocking her size, snapping photos, making her feel like she didn't belong in public, let alone in peace. But what they didn't know was that someone was watching. Not just a waiter. Not just another face in the background. No, he was about to become the one thing they never saw coming. Because this time, she wasn't alone. And when he finally stood up, the whole diner went silent. What happens next will not only break your heart, but light a fire inside it. This is a story about cruelty, yes, but more than that, it's a story about standing your ground, fighting back with kindness, and flipping the script when no one expects it. Stay until the end, because justice is on the menu. Comment where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more powerful stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. It was one of those gray, rainy afternoons where everything feels just a little heavier, the sky, the air, and for Molly, her heart. She walked into the small-town diner, coat pulled tight around her like a shield, hoping that maybe this place, this tiny little slice of warmth, could give her just a few minutes of peace. The soft bell above the door rang out as she stepped inside, the scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon wrapping around her like a blanket. Her eyes moved quickly across the room, families laughing over pancakes, couples sharing milkshakes, waitresses hustling from booth to booth. It was loud, busy, alive. But Molly wasn't here to be seen. She was just looking for a corner. A quiet booth by the window where she could disappear for a while. She slid into the booth with a soft sigh, settling into the seat that was a little too snug for comfort, but familiar enough not to make a fuss. She didn't want attention. She didn't want to be noticed. But that didn't stop it from happening. From the table just across the aisle, a group of teenagers erupted into giggles. At first, she ignored it, until the whispers started. "Look at her," one of them murmured. "She's too big for that booth." Another snorted, loud enough to hear, "She better not break it." Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Molly's fingers tightened around the laminated menu. Her eyes stayed locked on the page, not really reading, just trying to pretend she didn't hear, didn't feel, didn't care. But she did. She always did. The sting wasn't new, but it never stopped cutting deep. She shifted uncomfortably, wishing the booth would just open up and swallow her whole. Anything to get away from the smirking faces, the whispers, the feeling of being put under a spotlight she never asked for. Then came the phone. She caught it out of the corner of her eye. One of the teens was subtly tilting it in her direction. The flash was off, but she knew. She knew that photo would be sent in a group chat before she even took her next breath. #Diner Whale, someone muttered with a cruel chuckle. That was it. Her breath hitched. Her chest tightened. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, hoping no one saw, because she'd learned a long time ago that even tears can make you a target. But someone did see. He wasn't loud. He didn't rush over like a hero in a movie. He was just a man behind the counter, tired eyes, kind smile, apron smudged with syrup and coffee stains. A waiter, it seemed, but something about him felt different. He noticed the way Molly was curled in on herself, the way she gripped that menu like it might shield her from the world. And in that moment, he didn't hesitate. He walked over slowly, crouching beside her booth so he was at her eye level. His voice was soft, gentle, like someone speaking to a frightened animal. "Hey," he said kindly, "are you okay?" Molly blinked, startled by the question. She glanced at him, unsure how to answer. No one ever asked. No one ever saw her not like that. She gave a small nod and forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine," she whispered, barely convincing herself, let alone him. But he didn't push. He just gave a quiet nod, stood up and walked away. A few moments later, he returned, not with questions, not with pity, but with a warm mug of hot chocolate. Steam rose gently from the whipped cream on top. "This one's on the house," he said with a smile as he placed it in front of her. Molly stared at the cup, then up at him, surprised. She opened her mouth to speak, but all she could manage was a choked, "Thank you." He gave a small nod and walked away, back to the rhythm of the diner. She wrapped her hands around the mug like it was the first real comfort she'd felt in weeks. The warmth seeped into her fingers, and something else, something quieter, seeped into her heart. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the reminder that not everyone in the world was cruel. The voices at the other table blurred into the background. The storm outside tapped softly against the window. For a few precious moments, Molly wasn't the punchline. She wasn't the outcast. She was just a person, cared for, and slowly, so very slowly, beginning to feel like she mattered. Because sometimes, kindness doesn't need to come in big speeches or grand gestures. Sometimes, it's just a warm cup of hot chocolate, placed in front of someone at the exact moment they need it most. And in that quiet moment as she took her first sip, Molly felt something she hadn't in a long time. She felt safe. Just as the warmth of that hot chocolate began to melt some of the heaviness inside her, the laughter from the nearby table erupted again, louder this time. Molly tried to stay focused on the mug in her hands, anchoring herself in that small act of comfort. But the whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were deliberate. One of the teens, a boy with slicked back hair and too much confidence, leaned toward his friend and said loudly, "Should we ask her if she wants to finish our food too?" The table broke into laughter. Molly's throat tightened. She lowered her eyes, cheeks burning. She hadn't even ordered anything yet, and now, even eating felt like a risk. Like no matter what she did, she'd be mocked for existing. Then came the sound that made her stomach sink, a click. Camera shutter. She looked up just in time to see the girl across from her holding her phone up again, angling it toward Molly like she was some kind of exhibit. There was no subtlety now. No attempt to hide it. The girl smirked as she typed something onto the screen. "Post it," one of them giggled. "Fat shaming is trending again." Molly's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Her hands began to shake, her breathing shallow and uneven. Every instinct screamed to get up, to run out of the diner and vanish into the gray rain outside. But her legs wouldn't move. Shame had pinned her in place. She turned her face toward the window again, trying to disappear. The world outside looked quieter, gentler, almost like a different planet. Inside, though, the walls were closing in. She could feel the weight of every stare, every laugh, every hateful whisper clinging to her skin like a second layer she couldn't peel off. And the worst part? This wasn't new. This had followed her for years, in classrooms, in grocery stores, on buses, and now, here. In what was supposed to be a safe, quiet moment. A meal alone. A breath of peace. Even that was too much to ask. The worst kinds of pain are the ones that repeat. The ones you expect. The ones that show up even when you try to stay small, stay invisible, stay out of everyone's way. And now they were laughing like it was a game. Another boy made a dramatic show of stretching out his arms and pretending to gasp. "Careful, you guys. She might eat the table next." Laughter. It echoed around her, louder and sharper than the clatter of dishes or the sizzle from the kitchen. It was the only sound Molly could hear now. Like it was in her ears, her bones, her soul. A soft, strangled sob escaped her lips before she could stop it. She covered her mouth quickly with her hand, tears spilling freely now. Her vision blurred. The menu on the table faded. The walls of the diner, the rain outside, the people, all of it fell away. All that remained was her shame, her pain, and the sound of people laughing at her like she wasn't even human. She felt her chest cave in, her shoulders hunched, her spirit breaking under the weight of yet another moment where the world told her she didn't belong, that she was wrong, that she was a joke. But what she didn't know, what they didn't know, was that someone had been watching. The same man who had brought her the hot chocolate had seen it all. The phone. The comments. The way her body tensed each time the laughter hit her. He wasn't just serving tables. He was listening. And something in his face, something subtle and fierce, began to shift. He'd seen enough. From behind the counter, he'd watched the scene unfold with growing tension in his chest. Every snide comment, every muffled giggle, every cruel photo, they weren't just background noise. They were knives. And while most of the diner buzzed on, oblivious, he saw exactly what was happening. More important, he felt it. The pain in Molly's eyes wasn't unfamiliar. He'd seen it before, on strangers, on friends, and once, a long time ago, in the mirror. So he moved. Not fast. Not angry. Calm, steady, and certain, like someone who knows exactly what they're doing. He picked up a fresh mug from the warmer, poured a rich blend of coffee and cream, and added a swirl of whipped topping without a word. Then, as if it were just part of his routine, he walked back over to the booth where Molly sat, her hands clenched in her lap, her shoulders hunched so tight it looked like she was trying to disappear into herself. He placed the new mug gently on the table beside her empty one. "Refill," he said softly, his tone carrying something more than kindness. It carried intention. Molly looked up, startled, her eyes red, still wet with tears she hadn't meant to let fall. For a moment, she couldn't find her voice. But she didn't need to. He gave a small, reassuring nod, one that told her she wasn't crazy, that yes, he had seen what they were doing. And no, she wasn't alone. Then he did something unexpected. He crouched beside her booth again, just like he had earlier, only this time he didn't ask if she was okay. He already knew the answer. Instead, he said quietly, "They don't get to make you feel small." The words hit Molly like a soft wave, gentle, but powerful. Her lip quivered and she looked away, but he stayed there, just for a moment longer, until she met his eyes again. "I'm really sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to cause trouble." His brows furrowed, not in anger, but in disbelief. "You didn't cause anything," he said. "You came in for a meal. That's all." Then he stood. And as he walked away, there was something in his posture, something that had shifted. He was no longer just responding to cruelty. He was about to confront it. Back at the counter, he took a breath and wiped his hands on his apron. His expression was calm, but his eyes were steel. He scanned the table of teens, still laughing, still whispering, still pointing their phones under the table like cowards. And then, with complete composure, he walked over. The laughter stopped when he arrived. One of the boys looked up, grinning smugly. "Hey, we're ready to order now." But the man didn't reach for his notepad. "I'm going to have to ask you all to leave," he said firmly, voice quiet but unwavering. The table blinked. Confusion turned quickly into amusement. "Wait, what?" the girl with the phone laughed. "You're kicking us out? For what?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. For treating another customer like trash. For humiliating someone who came here to eat in peace. "That's not welcome here. You're not welcome here." The table erupted with protest. "This is ridiculous. We didn't even say anything to her." "Dude, we were just joking. Relax." But the man didn't budge. He leaned slightly forward, his voice low but cutting. "I'm not just your waiter," he said. "I own this diner. And I don't serve hate." Silence. The teens looked at one another, unsure if this was some kind of prank. But the look in his eyes told them it wasn't. This wasn't a warning. This was final. "You can go," he said. "Now." One by one, still stunned, they stood. They gathered their things. A few rolled their eyes. One muttered something under his breath. But none of them looked back. They walked out into the rain, their laughter replaced with silence. And just like that, the air in the diner changed. The quiet hum of conversation resumed. Dishes clinked, coffee brewed, and life went on. But at that one booth by the window, everything was different. Because someone had stood up. Because someone had seen. The bell above the door jingled as the last of the teens shuffled out into the drizzle, their laughter finally silenced, swallowed by the gray afternoon outside. Inside, the diner seemed to exhale, a quiet breath of relief, of stillness. Molly sat frozen in her booth, eyes wide, unsure of what she'd just witnessed. She had expected to cry. She had expected to leave early. She had expected to be embarrassed, maybe even broken. But what she hadn't expected was that. No one had ever stood up for her like that before. Not a teacher. Not a stranger. Not even family. And now this man, this kind-eyed waiter who brought her hot chocolate, had kicked out a full table to protect her dignity. No drama. No shouting. Just calm, unwavering conviction. like it was the most natural thing in the world to defend someone who'd been made to feel invisible. She stared down at the second mug on her table, now slightly cooled, the whipped cream melting slowly into the swirl of coffee and cream. Her hands trembled as she lifted it, not from fear this time, but from something else. Gratitude. He reappeared a few minutes later with a fresh napkin and a warm plate of pancakes she hadn't ordered. Figured you might be hungry, he said gently, placing the plate in front of her. Molly looked up, blinking through the last of her tears. You didn't have to. He smiled. Maybe not. But I wanted to. There was a pause. And then, just as he turned to walk away, she found her voice. Why? She asked softly. He stopped. She wasn't asking why he brought her food. She was asking why he'd stepped in. Why he'd gone so far to defend someone he didn't know. Why he cared. He turned back, eyes thoughtful. Because I've been on the other side of that table, he said, nodding toward where the bullies had Saturday, and I know how it feels when no one does anything. Molly swallowed hard. She wanted to ask more, but something in his face said that was all he was ready to share. Then another question came to her lips. Are you really the owner? A small, almost embarrassed smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, he said. I am. She blinked. But are you waiting tables? He chuckled softly. It's my place. I like being on the floor. Makes me feel connected to people. You see things when you're not behind a desk. And then, more gently, like who needs someone to step in? Molly looked down at her plate. The food smelled amazing, but it was the kindness in his voice that filled her up the most. A stranger, no, not a stranger anymore, had given her something no one else had offered in a very long time. A sense of worth. A reminder that she wasn't alone. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just know you're always welcome here. And with that, he returned to the counter, picking up an order slip like it was just another normal day. But for Molly it wasn't. Something had shifted. Not just in the diner, but in her. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like a target. She felt human. Respected. And as she picked up her fork and took a bite of the still warm pancakes, a smile slowly crept onto her face, gentle, quiet, but real. Because sometimes, the smallest moments are the ones that save us. The rain had finally eased outside. Droplets clung to the windows like soft reminders of everything that had washed away in the last hour. Inside, the diner felt warm, warmer than it had when Molly first walked in. Not just because of the coffee, or the pancakes, or the flickering neon light above the counter, but because something inside her had shifted. The ache was still there. Old wounds don't heal in a day, but they weren't as heavy. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was carrying it all alone. As she wiped the corners of her mouth with a napkin, preparing to leave, the man, the owner, the one who had stepped in when no one else would, approached her table one last time. He held something folded in his hand. Quietly, he placed it beside her plate. A note. She picked it up, unfolding it slowly, the paper slightly warm from his touch. You're always welcome here. You matter. Jay. Molly stared at the words, her heart swelling in her chest. So simple. So few. And yet, everything she needed. She hadn't said much. She didn't need to. With a soft, grateful smile, she nodded toward him. He gave her the same kind smile in return, the kind that said, I see you. I believe in you. Come back anytime. And then she stood. She walked out into the damp street with her head a little higher. Her steps a little lighter. The world outside hadn't changed much, but she had. Because one act of kindness had reminded her of something she'd almost forgotten. She was not defined by the cruelty of others. She was not small because someone tried to make her feel that way. She was enough, just as she was. And maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world. People who cared. People who saw. People who made space for others, even when the world tried to shut the door. To anyone watching this, maybe you've been where Molly has. Maybe you've heard the whispers, felt the stares. Maybe you've eaten in silence, hoping no one would notice you, only to be noticed in the worst way. Or maybe you've been on the sidelines, wanting to say something, to help, but you weren't sure how. Let Molly's story remind us all, kindness doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's a mug of hot chocolate, a warm plate of pancakes, a quiet, steady voice that says, "Not here. Not today." And sometimes, heroes wear aprons. So if this story moved you, share it. Let it ripple. Let someone else feel seen, heard, understood. Because someone out there needs to know they matter, just like Molly did. In a world that can be so unkind, be the one who stands up. Be the one who says, "You matter." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to check out more of our videos. We have plenty of inspiring and powerful stories waiting for you. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.